Welcome to the first spring webinar of 2023. For anybody who hasn't come to one of these before, we tend to run them on a quarterly basis. It's a great way for you to stay up to date with anything related to spring and our news. We're just over a year old now, so looking forward to sharing with you what we've achieved over that time and where we're going. For anyone who doesn't know me, I'm Carly Perry, Managing Director of Spring Innovation. We are the Innovation Centre of Excellence for the water sector in the UK and Ireland. We've got an hour together today, so I'm just going to walk you through the agenda. I'm going to start with a bit of the introduction to the webinar and what we want to achieve. I'm going to walk you through the journey so far, walk you through the future plans for spring, and then we're going to have a panel discussion and a Q&A. So we've got the Q&A function activated. So if you have any questions, please drop them in and I'll keep an eye on that. And when we come to the panel, we can I can either answer them or we can ask some of the panel members questions as well. The intention for today is to really provide you with an update about what we've been working on, also to get some feedback from you. There's some specific points that I'd like to ask questions of you and get some feedback, and ready to answer any questions that you've got. So hopefully it's going to be an informative session for you. Looking forward to jumping into it. Before we get into the content, let me just walk you through the panel. So you've got myself, I'll be leading you through the presentation, and then we'll bring in some panel members. So we'll have Tom Arnott, who is the co-director of the Water Innovation and Research Centre at the University of Bath, and has been heavily involved in steering Spring and the direction that we're moving in. He's a very active participant in a strategic advisory panel that we have, and has been a fantastic person to steer us as we grow. We were going to be joined by Paul Horton, who's the CEO of Future Water Association, who represent some of the supply chain. However, he has just had a bit of a personal emergency 5 minutes ago and has dropped out. So we're going to do our best to cover what we know about the voice of suppliers, but we'd also love to hear from you so that we can hear direct from you as well. We're also then going to be joined by Danny Hankin, who is the Innovation Manager at Yorkshire Water, who's going to be representing the water companies and sharing views of where the water companies want us to go and what we're working on so far. So that will be our panel, albeit with a slight change for Paul, but hoping that we can have a conversation around the supplier part and hear from you to cover that. Okay, so let's jump into it. So a reminder of what we're here to do. Spring is an innovation accelerator. We're here to enable collaboration and accelerate innovation. We've been created to prioritise and publicise the sector's challenges. So we hear a lot from the sector around, we want to know more about what the priority challenges are. So we're here to do that. We're also here to remove duplication of efforts. So on average, a very conservative average, an innovation project is duplicated 4 times. So we're here to remove that duplication. We also want to improve access for water companies, for suppliers to water companies, as well as facilitating collaboration. So that could be water company to water company, it could be supplier to water company. So all of that is designed to help us accelerate innovation and enable collaboration. If we can move through into the next slide, please. Thank you. We're very proud to say that we have a huge amount of stakeholders supporting us. Too many to talk through individually, but some key messages to pick out. We're supported by all 19 UK and Ireland water companies, and that means both financially and strategically. And we are feeling a fantastic level of support from companies who want to see Spring support and add on to existing innovation service offerings. We're very excited to say that we've secured 1.75 million in funding for the next 2 years, and we'll be continuing to look to extend that with water companies. Imelda, I'm just checking. I can see a few messages coming in saying people can't see slides. Is that a common problem, or is it just okay? Other people can see slides, so I'm going to continue, and hopefully that can resolve itself in the background. Also very happy to say that we are supported by suppliers. So Spring is here not just for water companies, it's here for suppliers as well. So we very much listen to the needs of both of those segments. So we have a strategic advisory panel that has some fantastic suppliers on that panel steering us. We also work closely with the likes of British Water and Future Water to make sure that we're engaging with the supply chain. We've also, towards the end of last year, added some additional support from startup communities, so the likes of Startup Discovery School or Founders Factory as well. We also, some new messaging for you is that we have recently launched a new partnership between Spring, Microsoft and ImpactX, which is a water venture studio. The goal is to design 3 startups over the coming year that can solve some of the sector's big challenges. So Spring is identifying what those challenges are. ImpactX is a venture studio who are helping to identify financing for startups, and Microsoft have their own venture studio and are helping to input and progress startups as well. So that's a new initiative that we're working on. I'm very excited to see how that goes over the remainder of the year. Okay, so if we click into the next slide, please. So I wanted to talk a little bit about our journey so far. So if we can keep moving through, thank you. So it's been a year of ups and downs, as any new business would know. So I'm very proud of what we've achieved over the last year, considering we've, for 6 months of the year, been only a team of 2, but that is now growing. So just to walk you through what that year's looked like, we launched in December 21, we secured funding for a year in January 22, and we moved into our first accelerator challenge. So we put a call out for innovation around achieving carbon neutrality. I came on board officially in May 22, and then we started progressing into more delivery around identifying innovations that we can build collaborative trials and remove duplication of efforts. We launched the knowledge transfer service offering, which I'll go into more detail about soon, in June 22. Secured further funding later in 22, so we secured the 2 years of funding that I just talked about as we started to implement our knowledge transfer showcases as well. We started to build the team, so happy to say that we now have a comms and engagement manager on board as well. And we launched a second accelerator challenge in October of 22 around delivering resilient infrastructure, and I'm going to go into more detail about that. So like I say, we then have a cadence of showcases and new team members coming on board. So we've done showcases with SES, Scottish, Severn Trent. We've now got an innovation manager, a program manager. We've identified more innovations where we can be building collaborative trials. In March, we're going to be holding another showcase with Northumbrian Water, and I'll share more on that shortly. And we've got a senior innovation manager starting in April as well. So like I say, it's been a intense and challenging year, but really proud of what we've done with a really small team in that time. But now we're moving into a new period, and I'll come on to that in just a bit. So Imelda, if you could flick through for me, please. Thank you very much. So I just wanted to do a quick reminder of our existing service offerings. So these services are all here to accelerate innovation, remove duplication, and build collaboration in the sector. So we've got the Water Innovation Strategy. So this document sets out the sector's ambitions to 2050. We hear a lot from innovators and suppliers about, we want to know more about what the problems are that you're trying to solve. This is the document for you to answer that question. So it lives on the Spring website. We'll send links out at the end of this, but that really has all the information that you need about what the ambitions of the sector are. We're the custodians of that document now. We're looking at how we can get more exposure for it, about how we can refresh it, about how we can monitor progress against it. So those are all things on our radar. The Spring Accelerator is a offering that puts out calls for innovation relating to that water innovation strategy, and then we build collaborative projects from those calls for innovation. We've done 2 of those, and I'll explain more on that shortly. The Innovation Snapshot is a new tool that we've been creating with water companies. It's a list of existing innovation projects in the sector to help us facilitate collaboration between companies that want to be working together on particular topics. There are future versions of that coming, and I'll explain more about that soon. Testbed networks. We have the register of testbed networks on our website. We are constantly updating that with any new information that comes through to us. And knowledge transfer, which is our most mature and, let's say, in-demand service offering. It is a library of innovation case studies on our platform where you can search and learn about insights from existing innovation projects, but it's also deep dive showcases where we get suppliers and innovation teams from water companies together to share the insights from a project, what went well, what didn't go so well, what was learned, and what can other people learn from. And across all of that is industry matchmaking that we are here to facilitate between suppliers and water companies. Whatever the matchmaking needs to be, we're here to do that. So I just wanted to move into a deeper dive of a few of the things that I've mentioned there. So the water innovation strategy, it is a fantastic source of information for any innovator wanting to know what the sector wants to achieve. So there's 7 themes in there. There are short, medium and long-term ambitions under each of those themes. I would highly recommend that if you are a supplier that feels like you don't know enough about the challenges that water companies have, please go and look at this as a source. The next piece that I wanted to go into a little bit more information about is the Spring Accelerators. So we're starting to build out a portfolio view of the innovations that are coming through Spring. This is very early days. This will mature as we go, but I wanted to introduce it to you all so that you can see the innovations that we're facilitating behind the scene. So once an innovator has been through the accelerator and subject matter experts have decided that they do want to take it forward, Spring will then facilitate the mobilisation or the action that's needed. So we've currently got 10 innovations in the portfolio, but they all need very different action from us. Some need funding support, so how can we link them to funding? Some need mentoring and a bit of market validation. Others need data and mobilisation. So we're working through different actions with each of these. And so we see over the years, this will grow and we'll be able to specifically talk about the duplication that has been removed by these innovations coming through Spring and being mobilised at a sector-wide level. The next piece that I wanted to go into was a little bit more on the knowledge transfer service offering. So this service is really about accelerating learning in the sector. We want to share the good news stories, the challenging news stories about projects that have happened so that others can learn from them. The showcases are the deep dive sessions where we do that. And since we've launched, we've now held showcases with SES Water. We've held 2 with them, Scottish Water and Severn Trent. We've had over 800 registrations, 1,000 views of the use cases that are on our platform. So we're really finding that this is a fantastic tool for us to be able to share the knowledge that water companies and suppliers have of existing projects. In terms of future showcases, we've got one in March with Northumbrian Water and the team that were behind a project around delivering and scaling a nationwide innovation project. So if you want to know more about that, please check on our LinkedIn page and you can see the registration details there. We've also got one coming up with Portsmouth Water and the team behind reducing household leakage with LeakBot. And then we've got United Utilities and AI-driven predictive asset management in practice with Data Technics. And then Welsh Water later in June, eDNA taste and odour monitoring, and then another United Utilities collaboration around scaling innovation in practice. So we're going to keep this cadence up. But what's really important for these is that we monitor how this knowledge is actually embedded in the sector. So we will be following the journey that happens with the knowledge. So for example, we've seen some fantastic examples where somebody from a water company has said, I didn't know this existed. This is fantastic. This helps accelerate my program. And so we'll keep in touch with that journey so that we can see how it's embedded and really measure the value of it. Wonderful. So if we could please move through, thank you. So what I wanted to do was just shift gears from what we have done over the past year into what does the future look like. So for me, the word I'm going to be using a lot to describe where we're going is stability. I really want us to move now into a stable place of delivery and really scaling what we're doing. And I'm really excited to say that we now have a team behind us so that we can achieve that stability. So we have Ben Hatfield-Wright, who is our program manager, and he's come in from Anglian Water, spent 18 years running large programs within Anglian, and comes in with a huge amount of experience that will help to get the business stable and help us to grow the service offerings as well. Imelda Fosu, who is our comms and engagement manager, who some of you may have met. She's been with us since October and is managing the knowledge transfer service offering as well as our broader comms and engagement. And she brings in a huge amount of experience from the world of startups. So it brings a different perspective in as well. And recently joined David Wright, who is our innovation manager and joins us from the satellite applications catapult and brings in a huge amount of experience of the innovation process and all the parts of that journey. So really excited to now have a team working with us. We are going to be growing to a team of 6. So we've got another new resource starting in April, and then we're hoping again for May or June. So that will then be the core team delivering behind us. So yeah, if you can flick through, please, Imelda, thank you. So in terms of what does the future look like? So we would like to be delivering more in some areas, and we would really like to be helping to break down some barriers. So one of the areas that we see spring, and we know that a lot of you asked for this from the beginning, is to help break down the barriers of mobilization. So it's great that we've had these 2 calls for innovation, but there are still challenges that we're experiencing when it comes to mobilizing those innovations. So we're working with all of our stakeholders to design some sessions to help us do that. We at the moment are talking to the brilliant innovation team at Northumbrian about how we can use a sprint at the Innovation Festival and design that sprint to bring together the right stakeholders to do in their style a year's worth of work in a week of how could we mobilize a project in a week. So that would look like, how do we design the experiment? How do we make sure the scope works on a sector scale? How do we break down the barriers of procurement? How do we break down the barriers of legal? So that's a big area that we want to be focusing in on, as well as mobilizing innovations. So those 10 innovations we've got in the portfolio, we want to really accelerate getting those to value. So that will be a big effort for us as well. Strategic knowledge transfer. So we have acknowledged fully that the knowledge transfer service so far has been very reactive. It's been very first come, first served, which has been fantastic. And there's been wonderful projects being shared. But we also need to be strategic at the same time. So we need to look at, where do we need knowledge? How do we go and find that knowledge, and how do we share that knowledge? So we had a fantastic workshop with the water companies this week where we talked about how we're going to do that and what the next level of that service offering looks like. So you can expect to see more from us in that space. Facilitating collaborations. Now that we've got a team in, we have much more resource to be able to facilitate those needs. We've got some specific needs growing from water companies saying, I want to start a new trial. How can Spring facilitate the collaboration for other water companies to come into that trial? So we see that being a growing area for us as well. Embedding the first year learnings. So we've obviously learnt a lot over the first year as well, and to try and summarize that in a high level way, there's a lot of lessons learned from the accelerator process, and we have lots of detailed documents behind that. But one of the ultimate lessons is really about getting that process right for the accelerator. So how do we set the challenge statements? How do we mobilize challenges that I've already talked through? So we've had some lessons there that we want to make sure that we get that process right before we launch another challenge. Knowledge transfer, I've already talked about the lesson that we want to move into more of a strategic place with that. But other lessons as well around governance. We need to keep the levels of governance innovative and dynamic, and that means that we can't always replicate the expectations of governance that a water company would have, for example, because we are a very small business and we need to be able to move at pace. So we want to make sure that our governance fits the size of the business. We also want to make sure that we're talking with one voice. So that means the supplier view and the water company view coming together. So we want to make sure that we're moving into a space where it is this one voice, one need from Spring, and they're not competing needs. So those are some of the lessons that we've learned. But like I say, we have much more detail behind all of that, and we'll be looking to share more on that as well. So a final piece here is just around engaging supply chain, and I wanted to go into more detail about that. So we intentionally, over the last year, to move us into a more stable place, we focused in on water companies, water company needs, water company investment and financing to get us the stability to be able to refocus towards suppliers and how we can deliver to suppliers. I'm really happy to say that we're in that place now. So what we've been hearing a lot of from suppliers is we want better access to water companies, that we want more of an open path for submitting innovation ideas in. And for anyone who's been on the journey since the beginning with us, you'll remember that we originally had a service offering called an open challenge where you would be able to submit open ideas in. However, over the past year, it's been fantastic to see that Ofwat has launched the Water Discovery Challenge, which is a great path for people to get those open ideas into the sector. So what we've now heard from suppliers is that you would like us to pivot away from that and look at other ways that we can give you access to water companies. So I've been working with the likes of British Water, Future Water on how we do that. And there's two proposals here that we're actually going to put a poll out and just ask for a little bit of really high level conceptual input to this. So one of the things we're proposing is something called a supplier snapshot. So what is it? It would be a source of supplier innovations where water companies can search for solutions and identify where they want to collaborate. So practically what that would look like is there would be a form that you fill out in the same way you currently do if you go to an individual water company portal. Spring would have a form which is information on what the solution is, what the problem is that it's solving, what are your target water companies' trials, what does implementation look like. That form would then take that information and put it into the snapshot where water companies would be able to search for what it is that you're offering. Water companies can then vote on things that they want to collaborate on, and Spring can then facilitate the collaboration. There will be different iterations of this. First iteration would probably be a very simple Google form, Google Sheet, us manually then getting in touch to do the facilitation. However, there would be ways that this could grow. Potentially this could replace some of the individual portals that you all use. It could be the one centralized place for this information to come in and make sure that it aligns on a sector level. So there's a lot of growth opportunity there. But what we are hearing from suppliers at the moment is that that would be a good way for you to get more exposure to water companies. We're in exploration process with these at the moment. I am going to do validations on this with water companies and how water companies would use the tool as well. So this isn't a launch of a service. This is a would you use this service conversation. The second part of this is an innovation exchange. So working again with the likes of British Water, Future Water, British Water had an innovation exchange program pre-pandemic that their members are asking to come back. So we're talking to them about, is there a role for Spring to play in reintroducing that service offering? So it would be subject matter experts from water companies giving a technical share on particular parts of the water innovation strategy and saying, this is where we need your help. Ideas would be submitted in to do an innovation exchange, and we would then create exchanges between subject matter experts and water companies to have a deep conversation about those innovations. So just to summarise then, Supplier Snapshot is a source for supplier innovations where water companies can search for solutions and identify collaboration opportunities. The Innovation Exchange is a deep dive into prioritised solutions and exchanging information between water companies and suppliers. We're going to send a poll out to ask you a question about, would you find these services useful? We are at a very high level stage, as I say, at the moment, so it is difficult for you to understand the mechanics of how this would actually work, and I am going to get into the detail of that with particular stakeholders over the coming weeks and months. But for now, we just wanted to gauge how useful this information, these services would be to you. So if you can answer how useful would you find the concept of a supplier snapshot based on the limited information that I've just given you. And then the second question will be, how useful would you find the concept of the Innovation Exchange? And appreciate those answers will be different for water companies and for suppliers. And I will be following up with both of those segments over the coming weeks and months. Okay, so we will collect that information in, and that will help us in the process of where we go with these service offerings next. Imelda, would you be able to flick through for me? Fabulous, thank you very much. So bringing all of this together, it has been a fantastic year with some big challenges that I'm really happy to see that we've now created a space with huge support from water companies. We're going to be re-engaging with suppliers to make sure that we're meeting your needs. We've got some fantastic conversations happening with Ofwat about how we align between what Spring is doing and the Ofwat Innovation Fund. Really happy to say that now we have the team coming in and we'll be able to get to this place of more stable delivery, which is a really happy place to be in. We will only be as successful as you engaging with us, though, so we want to make sure that you know the ways that you can do that. So you can register to the Spring platform, and that's where you'll be able to access the knowledge library. You can connect with us on LinkedIn. That's where we'll put out messages of events that we're doing or progress that we're making. There's a mailing list that you can join, and there's also an email address there. If you scan the code, you'll get a link tree so that you can follow up on that information later. But if you are a supplier and you have a project that you would like to share with the sector, please get in touch with us. We're very interested to hear more about that. So that's enough from me at that point. What we're going to do is open up for questions. So if I can please reintroduce the panel. Wonderful, thank you very much. So Tom Arnott and Danny Hankin. Danny, I can see you, lovely to see you. Tom, if I can ask you to join us, fabulous, excellent, thank you very much. And now I just want to assume, because it was a last minute note from Paul that he was unlikely to join us. I just want to check. Paul, are you there? No, it doesn't look like it. Okay, so for anybody who missed the beginning, just to mention, Paul Horton, CEO of Future Water, was going to represent suppliers in the panel session, but unfortunately he had a bit of a personal emergency 5 minutes before we started. So we're going to do our best to cover the view of suppliers, but we'd also love to hear from you as well. But Danny, Tom, I'm going to throw over to you to do a very quick intro of yourselves, please. So Danny, I'll start with you.
Thanks, Carly. So as Carly said, I'm an Innovation Programme Manager at Yorkshire Water. Been in the water industry about 3 years. So I'm actually still probably a newbie actually when it comes to the water industry, because I know a lot of people on this call will have been here for a lot longer than me. But I've been working in innovation across numerous sectors for probably longer than I'd actually like to admit. But I've worked across public, private sectors, industry, NHS. And then quite new to the water industry, so absolutely loving it and enjoying bringing in the kind of learning I've had from other sectors, and it's just a fantastic industry. There's always something new coming along, and it is great, and so good to see Spring coming along as well. And thanks for inviting me, Carly.
Brilliant, thank you, Danny. Tom.
Hi, Carly. Hello, everybody. And yes, again, thank you for the invitation for joining this session as a panel member. So yeah, my name's Tom Arnott. I'm an academic at the University of Bath in chemical engineering, but I founded and am a co-director of the Water Innovation Research Centre at Bath. I guess I've been working in and out of the water sector in research and innovation for about 30 years. And as Carly said earlier on, I was a member of the steering group that helped to try and direct the development of Spring in the early days, and I sit on the strategic advisory panel now. In terms of personal interests, I'm interested in sort of circular economy and net zero approaches to water systems, and with that in mind, I also work with a specialist sort of vision leadership team with Water Europe, so trying to bring connections from the European space into the UK space, which is somewhat challenging given good old Brexit, but I think there's a lot of lessons we can learn there.
Wonderful, thank you both, and welcome to the panel session. Just a reminder for everybody who is listening in, there is a Q&A function activated, and that's where we'd like to take your questions. It's looking a bit sparse at the moment, so going to encourage you all to get your questions in there. You've got us for half an hour, so please make sure that you do. I'm going to kick off with a few before hopefully some questions come through in that chat. So Tom, you just mentioned lessons learned. I think, you know, you've been very close to our journey, probably closer to our journey than most on this call, and you've just heard a little bit from me about the high level lessons learned, but you've also heard more when you've been in the strategic advisory panel sessions with us. Would love to just hear your view on those lessons learned, of which there are many, but if you were going to pick one thing for Spring to focus on over the next year, what would that be?
Okay, I'll try and pick one, but I'm going to be crafty.
That's okay. I fully expect that.
And whether I could pick the theme from yesterday's World Water Day, which is accelerating change, or I could pick mobilization, and I think they're both obviously almost the same thing. I think the Spring Initiative is fantastic. But it would be really good to see it start actually delivering on the ground examples of innovation challenges that are running and then reported across the sector in the wider sense. And I think as soon as we start to see some examples of those, and they're coming, we've seen the pipeline earlier on from the slides that Carly was showing, I think that will start to bring the communities in. And I think, again, a very important component is Spring will only be as successful as the level of engagement it can generate from all the stakeholders, whether they're researchers working in the low TRL space like I am, or supply chain SMEs with technology solutions, or end users, obviously like the water utilities, or other partners in related sectors, and I extend that into funding space as well. So, you know, tremendous ambition, but I think up and running and mobilizing and actually accelerating, and can we be agile? I think the front end has been working well in terms of the challenges and engaging people to provide proposals. I think the back end in terms of deploying projects and getting them up and running and active is an area where I think the whole community can work together, you know, different funding stakeholders, hosts of trials, debottlenecking procurement and those things. I think that's something that we really need to work on, because otherwise SMEs will go to other places, and in general experiences of operating research and development and piloting projects, in my experience, which of course could be just a snapshot, it's much quicker to get on the ground in collaborations with European water utilities than it has been my experience in general with UK water utilities. So I think that's an area where everybody needs to have a think about it, to get onto the ground more quickly once the interesting projects have been identified and funded.
Yeah, and I think that feeds really nicely into this view that we've got of we want to break down the barriers of mobilization, and so we're not going to launch any more calls for innovation until we've done a very focused stint of work in on that. So looking forward to seeing how that unfolds over the rest of the year. Danny, do you have any responses to that view around mobilisation?
No, I have to say, Zach, I absolutely agree with Tom. Like him, I've been involved with Spring for quite a long time as one of the work streams that helped set up the business model. And as people will know, it came out of the water innovation strategy. It's something that we really need as the water industry. So all the water companies are behind this. And actually seeing your river model, which I've actually the first time I've seen that, it's fantastic to actually see how far you've come in a year. There's actually a lot more activity when you put it down in one place. And I think when you're being in it all the time, you forget how much actually just you yourself have done a lot of it. So I think now having such a really good team in place and getting more people on board, I want, like Tom, I'd like to see you embed what you've done. Really to start to deliver. I don't think we need to look at bringing any more activity on. There's enough to go at as it is. We need to really focus down. Potentially now have a look at that innovation strategy, just see if we need to refresh it, tweak it, make sure it is still fit for purpose. I can't imagine there's going to be anything particularly major we need to change. But we know we need to make sure that Spring is actually delivering what we said we'd do in that strategy. Yeah. And then you're right, we really need to crack on, and we need to show some outputs from this. And for me, I'd like to see Spring as that repository of that knowledge within the water sector, that place that you go if you want to answer the question, if you want to find information, whether you're the water company or supply chain. Actually, we all know you go to Spring, you find the answer there, or if it's not, you know somebody to talk to who can start making those connections for you. And I think probably Spring needs to start challenging water companies as well. You know, talk about the strategy, you know, make us think differently, make us collaborate. You know, and as Tom said, we're only going to see value, and yourself, we're only going to see value from this, from what we put in as an effort from the water companies. So yeah, we've got a big part to play in this as well.
Brilliant, thank you.
I think I'd briefly pick up on that, if I might, Carly. No, it won't be long. But I think, and that includes, I think, two areas which are really important. One is perhaps in bringing in a wider range of stakeholders in the area of, shall we say, challenge development when we're looking forwards. And another is, I think, enabling a range of funding partners. You know, people are tending to look at the Ofwat fund. That's tending to be very near market. There's quite a gap between that fund and that opportunity and the sort of funding that the research space and the research base can leverage out of UKRI. Is there a way somehow to work with Innovate UK, for example, and other stakeholders? I mean, some of the supply chain companies have very, very large annual innovation budgets, you know, 20s and 30s of millions, and we're not looking them to fund everything. But if we can get the leverage right and pots of money aligned with research and innovation programs, I think that potentially is a really, really powerful mechanism. So I'm looking further forwards there. But I think if you can launch challenges where you've got an identified fund that people can apply to, or got an idea of existing cash available, I think that could transform the success of those opportunities as well.
Most definitely. And that's something that we're learning and figuring out how we can do more of that over the next year as well. I'm just going to switch to some of the questions that we've got coming in. So a question in the Q&A. Given some of the issues that the industry has at the moment, what is the panel's thoughts about how we can innovate process rather than just technology? I think this is an interesting question. I hear this a lot. I think a lot of the ecosystem automatically goes to technology when they're talking about innovation, but we're all very aware it's much more than just technology. It is the people and process side of things as well. So I think, Danny, Tom, I'd love to hear from both of you about what are your thoughts on how we innovate process, not just technology. Danny, I'll come to you first.
Oh, thanks, Carly.
Sorry.
That's a tough one, isn't it? Yeah, it's difficult, the water industry, isn't it, being such a highly regulated industry. Obviously there are barriers there, but I guess which way are we looking at in terms of process for managing projects, for bringing projects in?
I think it's all of those things we're talking about. You know, it's it's again back to the process of mobilization, the process of managing innovation in companies, how that's managed. So it's kind of really broad.
Yeah, and I think I'm sure there's a lot we can learn from other industries, which we say all the time. I think we were talking on Monday, weren't we, at the development group, about some of these showcases in future. And you were talking about a potential visit some innovative companies out in the US. Yeah, we need to be open, obviously, within that highly regulated framework that we talk about, but it would be useful to understand a bit more as innovation practitioners, potentially, how it does happen in some slightly slicker, faster moving industry. Because we are in some, we're an old fashioned industry, shall we say, in many ways, for good reasons. Yeah, I don't have the exact, I'm not a business process expert, but yeah, I'm looking forward to learning from some of the smaller companies as well, and maybe understanding from supply chain what they see the barriers are, because we hear about this all the time, don't we, that supply chain SMEs are struggling to engage with water companies, there are barriers in place, and I'm looking forward to hearing a bit more about what those perceived barriers are externally, if that answers the question at all.
Thanks, Danny.
Maybe not.
Tom, do you have thoughts on process versus technology innovation?
I think if we're talking about the process of innovation, I think there isn't a quick fix there, I think, because actually there's a real deep cultural component to that within the ethos of companies, and simply appointing an innovation manager does not transform your company into an innovative company. And that's absolutely no criticism of innovation managers. You know, you're definitely in the line of fire there, in the sense of people wanting to talk to you, and that highlights the capacity issue. You know, do we genuinely have enough capacity, and I mean people who can do things and drive projects within the utility sector as well as within the SME base, to do this effectively and do this at pace in light of the challenges that we have? So there's a human resource issue, and I think there's an economic resource issue. If you look at the spend on R&D in the utility space across electric power systems, gas, energy supply, water, all of those things, it is a tiny, I think it's less than 0.3% of the annual R&D spend in the UK. And that's proportionately way below what's being spent in equivalent countries across Europe or in the USA. And I'm not going to criticize Ofwat for launching their innovation fund. That's a fantastic initiative, but it isn't a lot of money in the scheme of things and in relation to the scale of the problem. So I think there are two, and there won't be, neither of them are quick fixes. You know, there's the broad cultural and capacity issue in terms of people, and then there's the funding of it to make it all happen more quickly. So those are sort of high level things. And I think, you know, the data science and data analytics, a lot of people say, oh, AI is going to solve all my problems. Well, yes and no. But I think it can do a lot of analysis of existing systems and existing installations. And there might be some improvements that are relatively easy to make as long as we can have access to open data. And I think that's another critical step. Open data sharing to allow people to play with it in context, again, could debottleneck a lot of the challenges that we're facing, or indeed identify them more specifically. And it might create alternative solutions which are not necessarily technology led.
Okay, thank you. And just some thoughts. Sorry, Danny.
So I was going to say, and building on that, if you see, like the report on the BBC yesterday about the report coming out for storm overflows, there's some eye-watering figures there. You know, talking about what's it, £56 billion needing to invest in our sewer networks. I mean, you're right, the amount of investment that goes into water, we are the poor neighbour, aren't we, compared to oil and gas and renewables. But yeah, We do absolutely need, that level of investment. We can't innovate. We can, but no, small tweaks of incremental innovation are not going to get us out of some of the issues we're facing. If you look at climate change, population growth, and aging infrastructure, there are some really big problems we need to go there. And in terms of, you talked about resources of people and companies, that's where collaboration absolutely is key. And the work that you're going to do in spring of bringing together the knowledge that's already been done, and actually how can we learn from each other and not recreate the wheel each time, and work together. And you're right, and that culture change of, and it's happening. I think certainly that the Ofwat Innovation Fund has really provided a focus for R&D managers across all the water companies to get together, and now spring. And certainly the 3 years I've been in the industry, I've seen the sea change and people actually being open to collaborating and working together and knocking down those silos.
Yeah, that's really good to hear. So I can see some questions coming in now, which is fantastic. So I'm going to attempt to answer a few quickly. On that conversation we were just having around process innovation versus technology innovation, specifically from a spring point of view, we're very conscious of that. So the work we're doing on breaking down barriers of mobilisation is all process related. We also want to, at some point, put calls for innovation out that aren't necessarily around technical solutions for the ambitions in the water innovation strategy, but more broad around process and people as well. So I'd say watch this space in the future for that. Another question we've got here is around, have you any thoughts on how to separate the credible innovators who have technologies that are ready to add value with those who are less credible? So can the time wasters be flagged to our mutual benefit? So a bit of thought from me on this. So we've been discussing recently, what is Spring's role? When you say technologies that are ready to add value, to me that means they're higher up TRL, they're ready to be procured, they're ready, they've been tested, they're ready to go. We are working out what Spring's role is when it comes to lower TRL and higher TRL ready to procure. So that's something that we're looking at the moment. But in terms of the time wasters in inverted commas, it's interesting. I was having a conversation with a water company this week about the portal that they've got that brings ideas in. Currently, over 90% of those ideas are turned down. So you're looking at a small bucket of the ideas that come in are actually taken forward. So we need to think through what is Spring's role. If we're going to create a centralized place for ideas to come in, then how do we respond to the ones that are a no? How many of those can we give detailed feedback to? How many can we say it's a no, but if you go and think about this, then it might be a maybe. So we absolutely want to be able to do that, because we don't want those who aren't hitting a water company need, or maybe haven't thought through the value of their proposition, to keep knocking on doors when it's going to be the same answer, because we want to speed up that process to get to the answer. Tom, Danny, do either of you want to add anything into that?
I have to say, we do something similar at the moment in Yorkshire Water. We have a portal, we have a form on our website, and it is really work intensive to respond. We try to respond to every query that comes through from every supplier, every SME, every academic, like you say, provide a good response, and if it's not something that we can take up at the time, try and give them some pointers. So I have a feeling we're probably all, there might be some examples where we're all duplicating that with the same supplier, potentially, and it would be useful and really helpful, I think, for us and for the suppliers to have a one place where we can do that, we can all feed into it. So that answer is, and it might be the same answer to several SMEs who've got a similar invention or innovation that needs some tweaking, and actually to be able to see those answers, I think, is very powerful, and just remove that duplication we're talking about, because it is resource intensive, and we want to hear those ideas come in, we really do. And I wouldn't, time wasting isn't maybe the right term, that's quite emotive, isn't it? But sometimes it's maybe the right invention at the wrong time, or it's just, it needs that work. And I think really powerful, but don't underestimate the amount of time that takes, because it's, we talk about Chat GPT or whatever, don't we? But actually there's a real person on the end of these answers and these emails.
Yeah, and I think what we're starting to talk about here is that supplier snapshot that I was sharing, that if we had one point where ideas came into the sector, we created a list with Spring, and water companies can then review and feedback through that one point. It's going to remove the duplication. And I could see a chat going on in the chat function about, why does Welsh Water still have its own portal? Well, it's early days. We're only a year into Spring, and we can't expect to turn off everybody's portals in that time. But that is the nirvana situation, that we all move closer towards that, where you're not going to all the individual company portals. You've got the one space through Spring to do that. Tom, do you want to add anything into that?
Well, very briefly. I mean, I think. Yeah, is there a one-stop shop? I think if Spring can become that and get regular and genuine engagement on the other side from the innovation managers and the utilities or whoever's relevant, I think that would be the ideal outcome. But just back to the point about what about those whose technologies aren't quite ready yet, which is, I think, how I understood it, Michael's question. Well, again, is that the opportunity to work with funders such as Innovate UK and say, look, we like the concept, but we don't think it's ready to go full trial yet. Is there a way to work with a different funding source and to facilitate that so you don't lose the opportunity? You know, they don't go away, oh, I've been turned down, I'm going to go to Europe or the Far East or whatever. But could we engage with Innovate or other middle TRL funders in order to see if you could facilitate the development and enhancement of that technical option such that it would be ready for trial, and there's a sort of incubator context. And I think that crossover between the research and innovation space and the relationship between Acquia and Spring in shaping the research space, if you like, with Acquia, the development and innovation space with Spring, if we could join that up as a program of R&D and innovation aligned with the 2050 innovation document, with funding sources aligned with that, depending on whether it's low, medium or high TRL, I think we'd have something that was really, really powerful. And it's that gap in the middle where lots of innovators find it very hard to cross. They call it the valley of death, which is a bit strong, but it's true. For a lot of SMEs, they don't make it across that gap. So I think that's slightly longer term for Spring and Acquia together to see if we can do that. But I think that would be an enormously powerful thing if we could set it up.
Yeah, and just on that, to share that I mentioned that we're doing a bit of a refresh of our governance. We are looking to bring in more supplier voices into our board. We're looking to bring in fundraising voices into our board as well. So we're really looking to see how we can add to the already diverse board that we've got to try and start influencing the strategy in that space. So a specific question here around how does the funding for challenges work? So there's more detail here, but ultimately what's being asked is what's the pot of money at the end of a Spring accelerator? So we intentionally didn't create a specific pot of money because we knew that innovators have very different needs. So when I walked through the portfolio, I mentioned that some innovators want mentoring, some innovators want market validation, some want access to data. Yes, some do want funding. So we have a flexible approach to that. So there's a number of different ways that we can fund the innovations coming through. So one thing that we're talking to water companies about at the moment is creating a centralized pot of funding that comes directly from the water companies for the accelerated challenges. So each water company has its own budget when it comes to trialing innovations. And we've talked at the Acquia board about how we can tap into that funding to progress Spring innovations. So that's one way. We can obviously also tap into the Ofwat Innovation Fund. However, noting that if you run a Spring process, then an Ofwat process, that's an incredibly long process and time to value. So that's not the ideal path for us. It's the chosen path when we've got a really complex solution that already lines to a bid that's going in. So to avoid duplication, we'll do that. So with the example of Xylem and Siemens, they've gone into an Ofwat bid because there was a big net zero hub bid going in that their innovations aligned directly with. So we didn't want to duplicate that. So we need to be flexible in the approach for how we're looking for funding. But we have heard loud and clear from innovators that they do want a bit more clarity on how projects are going to be funded. So we're going to take that lesson and help and share some more clarity on that in the future. So moving into, and actually I think this is aligned as well in terms of this speed of mobilisation point. The challenge for resilient infrastructure was posted in October. On your slides, there are 6 companies left and the stage is at 10% only. So ultimately the question here is, what's the time from posting a challenge to the implementation of a solution? So this is the big question that we've been talking about at the moment, is how do we shorten this down? So Spring's process at the moment from launching a challenge to identifying what we want to take through is 4 months. However, there's another bit of that process, which is once we've identified the ones that we want to collaborate on, how do we mobilize that collaboration? And on average, that's about a 6-month process. There's the saying of, if you want to do something fast, do it on your own. If you want to do something well, do it together. This is about doing it together. And so we do need to acknowledge that that takes time. However, I fully acknowledge that that 6 months needs to be shortened. And therefore, that's the work that we're going to do before we release any new calls for innovation. We absolutely hear that this needs to be the focus. So the sprint that we want to run at the Northumbrian Innovation Festival focuses in on how do we shorten that time frame down. Tom, Danny, I think you've probably already shared your thoughts on that, but do you want to add anything else?
Well, I think this is a really important area, and Tony Harrington, I don't know if you're still on the call because we were chatting about this in London a few weeks ago. I fully understand the need to go through formal framework procurement processes if you're developing a major infrastructure installation. But is there a way, and I don't know if this is a regulatory issue as well, is there a way of debottlenecking the deployment of research and pilot trials, in particular, to avoid what appears to be an unnecessary, from my perspective, an unnecessarily long route to deployment and project startup? That 6-month window that Carly was just talking about. So I don't know if you're able to talk, Tony, or if it's a fair question to spring on you, but I don't know if you have any views, either from the regulatory constraints or from the water company constraints.
Tony will be muted because he's not a panel member, I'm afraid. So
I'm terribly sorry, Tony. Forgive me. So I'm not having a go at water companies. That wasn't my point. It was, how do we undo that for the research and innovation space? Clearly, significant trials on a site might be disruptive, and you've got to be very careful to protect the existing installations. But is there a way about being more agile with smaller scale, technical ambitions?
Wonderful. Okay, so there is a lot of chat happening, and I've been trying my best to keep up with it, as well as looking at the Q&A. So apologies if I've missed questions, comments, but we will go back through this and see if there's any follow-ups that we need to do. What I would just like to finish off by saying that if you are a supplier and you have an innovation that you have already tested with a water company and you would like to share it through Spring, please get in touch at that admin email address, because we can help you to get exposure into water companies. We're here to do that. I would also just like to say a huge thank you to all of the water companies who are offering incredible support and willingness to change on this journey with us, willingness to be disrupted, willingness to be uncomfortable. All of that great stuff is going on at the moment, and I really, really appreciate that. And so specifically would like to say thank you to Tom Arnott from Bath University and Danny Hankin from Yorkshire Water for joining us on the panel and sharing your thoughts around some of the meaty questions that we've got and the progress that Spring has made. So we'll close the webinar there and just say thank you to everybody who's come along to listen. Thank you for engaging with Spring. Please continue to do so and let us know your thoughts about what you need and the direction that Spring is going in. But thank you all. Have a lovely afternoon and hope to see you all soon.
Thanks, Carly.
Thanks.
Thank
Bye.
Thank you, Carly, and thank you for your drive in making Spring happen.
Thank you so much, Tom.